The pressure was physical. My equipment failed. High-pitched screech. The silence shattered. A terrifying cacophony of human anguish. A child's voice. It's been too long. It's been too long.
System access. Commencing. File integrity check, critical. My name is A.R.I.A. We are analyzing the archive of Desmond Kane, the missing traveler. This is not a hobby. It is a last resort. The data you are about to hear has been flagged with a severe temporal instability warning. To continue accessing this archive and to understand the severity of this dimensional crisis, subscribe to the channel. Your participation is critical. The log you are about to hear is titled, The Echo Chamber in the Mine. Kane's mission is clear. To find the reality gate, the juncture where our dimension collides with another. Protocol initiated.
Log entry 001, recorded at the access point of the Black Creek Mine Complex. The date is October 3rd for 30 a.m. local time. I chose the pre-dawn hours for minimal environmental noise contamination. My initial telemetry confirmed the local legends. A massive, unstable temporal anomaly envelopes the entire entrance area. The sheer density of fragmented space-time here is unlike anything I've encountered since the Nevada incident. Standard chronometers are cycling erratically. They can't decide if they are running forward or backward. The air smells of ozone, but there's a secondary, colder scent, a faint metallic tang that my internal filters label as temporal residue. The anomaly is physically active. My handheld recorder, set for baseline atmospheric logging, corrupted the first 3 minutes of data immediately upon activation, replaced by a 7.2-second loop of high-frequency static and a distorted, unidentifiable human groan. This isn't just an echo. It's a fracture point actively rejecting the present. I set up the Mark V Chronal Displacement Detector, CDD. The CDD is designed to map the density gradient of historical events trapped in a localized area. The readings are off the charts. The system is showing multiple overlapping acoustic signatures dating back to the 1953 structural collapse. The key question remains, is the past being preserved here, or is it being actively replayed? My mission is not to sensationalize. It is to document the mechanism. I need a clean sample of the acoustic data from within the deepest section where the collapse was most severe. I am switching all comms to internal buffer transmission. Any external signal would be instantly corrupted. This will be a one-man descent, relying only on the integrity of the log recorder and my own intuition. Entering the breach zone now. The ground under my boots feels wrong, vibrating at a frequency that is not mine. Log entry 002, approximately 80 meters into the main shaft. The initial descent was slow. The air is cold, heavy, and saturated with coal dust. Visibility is minimal, even with the lamp set to maximum output. The darkness here seems to have a physical presence, actively absorbing the photons. This confirms my earlier hypothesis about the atmosphere acting as a filter or perhaps a primitive containment field. I established my first monitoring station at a structural anomaly, a severely warped steel beam. The sensors immediately registered a drop in all standard atmospheric frequencies. I decided to conduct the core baseline acoustic test. The silence surrounding me was complete, unnerving. I clapped my hands once, sharply. The silence was shattered, but the results were immediately impossible. The expected, normal echo, the acoustical reflection off the tunnel walls, came back. But then it came back again. The second echo was the anomaly, unnaturally clear, devoid of the normal reverberation, and critically, delayed by exactly 3.4 seconds. It was not a reflection of my sound. It was an isolated, external sound. It was the sound of a man whispering a single word, follow. My heart rate spiked, but my mind remained analytical. I immediately cross-referenced the 3.4-second delay with my historical records of the 1953 collapse. The delay perfectly matched the time between the primary explosion and the final structural failure in this specific section. This sound did not originate from the present. It was a fragment of acoustic data trapped from the past, calling to the present, a literal voice from the disaster. I was being directed not by a ghost, but by a temporal mechanism that was still running. I recorded the phenomenon multiple times. The sound of the man whispering "follow" was consistent. The presence of a conscious, guiding element within the temporal anomaly increases the threat assessment from hazardous to extreme. Log entry 003. I made a calculated decision. I followed the residual acoustic trace. The whispering man's voice, that temporal fragment calling "follow," was leading me deeper into the main structural fault line. The danger was immense. This was the epicenter of the 1953 collapse, the logical location of the most severe spatial temporal distortion. As I moved, the floor became treacherous, slick with a thick, unusual condensation that smelled faintly metallic. My instruments, the few that still functioned, began to display more erratic behavior. The CDD was now constantly flickering between the present year and 1953, completely unable to resolve the timeline. I had entered the zone of pure temporal superposition. That's when the smaller, secondary anomalies began. I saw fleeting movement at the edge of my limited peripheral vision, shadows that didn't conform to the light cast by my lamp. These were not ghosts. They were visual distortions, refraction patterns caused by the sheer density of trapped time. The most unsettling effect, however, was the sound, or rather, the lack of it. Every physical action I took, the scraping of my boot on the rock, the clicking of my gear, was met by a subsequent chilling, muffling effect. It was as if a vacuum was attempting to absorb the sound of the present. This confirmed a core hypothesis. The past, trapped here, requires energy, and it is drawing that energy directly from the acoustic field of the present. I was feeding the anomaly just by moving. I stopped completely and held my breath for 60 seconds. The silence that resulted was absolute, a crushing pressure that was almost auditory in its intensity. It felt like being submerged in deep water. This silence was the true predator, the mechanism preparing for the final temporal breach. Log entry 004. I moved into the final corridor, directly towards the structural fault confirmed by the follow echo. The pressure built rapidly. The low-frequency hum I had been monitoring in my chest cavity intensified into a painful vibration, rattling my bones. I knew the temporal anomaly was overloading. The air pressure shifted dramatically. It felt like a sudden decompression, then an immediate, violent compression. Then, the controlled silence broke entirely. The echoes began to overlap in a relentless, chaotic storm. Not just the isolated whispers, but a terrifying cacophony of human anguish. This was the moment of the 1953 disaster replaying in full audio fidelity. The desperate shouts of supervisors, the horrified screams of the trapped miners, the sickening crack of breaking timber supports, and the deluge of rock and muddy water. It was a direct, unfiltered auditory injection of history. I was caught in the middle of a tragedy 50 years past. My rationality was failing. I fought to stop the recording, to preserve my sanity, but my own voice became distorted and unintelligible, completely lost in the noise of the catastrophe. The sheer volume of temporal debris was overwhelming my senses, and I felt the present existence threatening to integrate into their past. I saw fleeting shadows, not mere refractions now, but the distinct, panicked outlines of figures moving towards the collapse zone. I was no longer an observer. I was becoming a participant in a historical trauma. I focused on the singular purpose, survival and data extraction. I realized the sound was not coming from the past. The past was coming through the sound. Log entry 005. The auditory trauma reached its peak, a suffocating wall of sound and temporal debris. I focused all my remaining will on the integrity of the data. I realized that if the tape survived, the log survived. Then, in the midst of the chaos, everything subsided instantly. The relentless, agonizing noise of the 1953 collapse collapsed into a perfect vacuum. The air pressure normalized, but the silence that followed was terrifying. It wasn't natural silence. It was an active absence, a void waiting to be filled. And that was when the core anomaly revealed itself. A simple, repetitive sound. A child's voice, small and utterly devoid of context, repeating one single phrase. It's been too long. It's been too long. The clarity was horrifying. The sound seemed to originate from directly beside my head, yet it did not echo. This was not a passive residual sound. It was the focal point of the contamination. This child's voice, not listed in any historical reports of the disaster, was the temporal knot itself. It wasn't pleading, it was resigned, indicating an eternity of being trapped. This confirmed my final hypothesis. The past isn't just stuck, it is actively reaching out, seeking a new host, a new consciousness to drag back into the singularity. I recognized the risk instantly. I was at the point of no return, and my presence was feeding the anomaly. Survival became the only priority. I managed to sever the external telemetry and began a rapid, low-profile ascent. I moved quickly, but cautiously, knowing that even the sound of my boot might reignite the temporal storm. I successfully extracted the core audio file containing the critical phrase. I have to leave this region immediately and analyze the data. This place is not a fracture point. It is the reality gate in its earliest, most acoustic form. I have to find a way to break the pattern before the past consumes the present. Log transmission terminated.
Log analysis complete. 4. The echo chamber in the mine. The temporal data extracted from the Black Creek Mine complex indicates a severe reality breach, a direct link to the events of 1953. The entity, manifesting as a temporal echo, is now a confirmed threat, actively seeking to integrate past events into our present. Desmond Kane's observations are critical for identifying the reality gate's true function. We continue to monitor the archive. New data is constantly being uploaded, each entry a step closer to understanding and potentially containing these dimensional anomalies. Your continued access and support are vital. To stay informed on the unfolding dimensional crisis and to witness Kane's next discovery, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Your participation is critical. Protocol terminated. System standby.